Thanks for visiting my reading room. I'm Nancy, reader and tutor, and also small business owner of West Coast Polar Ice, Italian ice and frozen specialties. And I love reading aloud. This is a labor of love for me. I believe that our country needs strong critical thinkers now more than ever. And so my mission is to create a love for reading cover to cover, one book at a time. And tonight I'm also reading from Wordly Wise, which is a wonderful book. There's a series of these books. If you have kids, you're probably very familiar with them. They're reading passages, which incorporate a lot of really good vocabulary words. So I thought I would kind of blend them in and integrate them in within my readings, So I hope you enjoy it, but I'll first read the word and then the definition before I read the passage itself. Okay, we begin. Curtail, a verb, to cut short or reduce. The performance was curtailed when a fire broke out in the theater. Discriminate, a verb, to make or recognize clear distinctions. During hunting season, it's prudent for hikers to wear orange so that hunters can easily discriminate between people and other animals. To treat in a less or more favorable way. Some employers still discriminate against women by paying them less than their male counterparts. Discrimination is a noun, the recognition of clear distinctions. It's helpful to make a discrimination between what you think you want and what you really need. The act of making a distinction in favor of or against a person or thing on the basis of the group or category rather than according to actual merit. Federal law prohibits discrimination based on race or creed. The act of making fine distinctions, good or refined taste. Your penchant for garish attire shows a lack of discrimination. The next word, espionage, a noun, the act of spying, especially a government spy, obtaining secrets of another government. Counterintelligence specialists use their knowledge of high-tech spying equipment to thwart acts of espionage. Inalienable, an adjective, not able to be taken or given away. United States citizens are promised certain inalienable rights that are spelled out in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Incarcerate, a verb, to confine or to put in prison. Maximum security prisoners were incarcerated on Alcatraz, an island in San Francisco Bay, until 1963. Incarceration is a noun. His incarceration lasted 5 years, after which he was a free man. Indignity, a noun, an insult to one's pride, offensive or humiliating treatment. His mother waited until they got home to reprimand her son in order to spare him the indignity of being criticized in front of his friends. Indiscriminate, adjective, not marked by careful distinctions, haphazard. She was an indiscriminate reader and devoured everything from comics to history books. Infamous, an adjective, having a very bad reputation, notorious. The CIA's infamous agent, Aldrich Ames, sold compromising information to the Soviets that cost the lives of many Soviet secret agents. Disgraceful, vicious. The defendant was charged with an infamous crime. Infamy is a noun. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was an act of infamy. Intercede, a verb, to act or plead on another's behalf, to try to smooth the differences between two parties. Instead of interceding, my parents encouraged my brother and me to resolve our differences on our own. Malign, a verb, to say negative and unfair things about. Slander. The proprietor thought maligning his competitors' products would boost his own sales. Adjective, evil, showing ill will. The malign look he gave me expressed his anger. Perpetrate, to commit as a crime or other antisocial act. The con artist was guilty of perpetrating a minor scam. Perpetrator, noun. I couldn't figure out who the perpetrator was until the end of the mystery. Rampant, adjective. Threateningly wild, without restraint or control, widespread. The rampant vines covered the slope and began to climb the surrounding areas. Rancor, a noun, a deep, long-held feeling of hatred or bitterness. His rancor for the group turned him into its implacable foe. Reparation, noun, amending or repair. The building needed major reparation after the tornado. A making up or payment for a wrong or damage done, especially in the case of an international war. Iraq was required to pay reparations to Kuwait after the Gulf War. Smattering, a noun, superficial, scattered knowledge. He picked up a smattering of Spanish while in Mexico, a small amount. She wrote thousands of letters, of which only a smattering have been published. Okay, so now we will read the reading passage for these words. Yoshiko Uchida, second-class citizen. Although their parents had been born in Japan, Yoshiko Uchida and her older sister Kiko were American citizens from birth. The girls spoke only a smattering of Japanese and grew up in Berkeley, California in the 1930s as typical American teenagers, believing that they possessed the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness promised to all Americans. But when Japan launched its infamous attack on the United States fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on December 7th, 1941, they discovered that they were mistaken. Of course, the Uchida sisters deserved no blame for the actions of Japan's military leaders, but they suffered from the anti-Japanese feeling that was suddenly rampant among the populace. Japanese Americans were maligned as potential traitors and suspected of conspiring to commit acts of espionage for a country with which the United States was now at war. Within hours of the attack, United States government agents searched the Uchida home and took Yoshiko's father away without disclosing what he was accused of or where he was being taken. He was one of many Japanese Americans placed in similar circumstances who had broken no law and were never charged with any offense. This was merely the first of many indignities suffered by Yoshiko's family. The right to travel freely was severely curtailed for all Japanese Americans on the West Coast. They were forced to observe an 8 o'clock curfew and were forbidden to go more than 5 miles from their homes. They were also ordered to turn in all cameras, binoculars, shortwave radios, and firearms. On May 1st, 1942, by order of President Roosevelt, 120,000 people of Japanese descent living on the West Coast, 2/3 of them American citizens, were indiscriminately rounded up and were allowed to take only what they could carry. The Uchida family was among those forced to leave. Yoshiko's studies, she had been close to getting a degree in education at the University of California, Berkeley, were abruptly terminated. She had no idea when, if ever, she would be allowed to resume her education. The Uchidas were taken to a nearby makeshift prison camp where Mr. Uchida was permitted to rejoin his family. After being held there for 4 months, the family was moved to a prison camp near Delta, Utah, on the edge of the Sevier Desert. The camp, called Topaz, was surrounded by barbed wire with watchtowers at each corner. It was one of 10 such camps throughout the United States, hastily set up to detain Japanese Americans. thanks to friends to the outside who interceded on their behalf. And because the hysteria against Japanese Americans had abated somewhat, the incarceration of Yoshiko and Kaiko Uchida at Topaz lasted less than a year. Yoshiko was given leave to attend school at Smith College in Massachusetts, and Keiko was given a position at the Department of Education's nursery school at nearby Mount Holyoke College. Later, as investigation into their backgrounds showed them to be blameless, their parents were allowed to leave Topaz and were soon reunited with their daughters. Yoshiko's father never permitted himself to feel rancor against his adopted country for the wrong it had perpetrated against Japanese Americans. He believed that one day the government would admit it had made a terrible mistake. That day finally came in 1988 when Congress voted to pay reparations to the surviving members of the uprooted families. For Yoshiko, the experience of being treated like a second-class citizen was not easily forgotten, but she used the experience positively. Yoshiko became a prolific writer. Many of the books and short stories she wrote helped to educate others about the unjust treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II. These stories not only convey the alienation and rejection felt by all victims of discrimination, they also serve as necessary reminders of the terrible consequences that result from denying someone or a whole group of people the fundamental rights meant to be enjoyed by all Americans. And I hope you all enjoyed that. Good night.